Jordan Carter sat stiffly in the defendant's chair, his heart pounding as the judge, Harold Whitaker, stared him down. The 17-year-old had never imagined he'd find himself in court, let alone accused of a crime he didn't commit. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was a straight-A student, a track star, and a kid who respected the law. But none of that seemed to matter today. The prosecutor, a slick-haired man named Richard Dorsey, paced the courtroom floor, spinning a tale that painted Jordan as a delinquent. "Your Honor, this young man was caught red-handed attempting to break into a jewelry store. The evidence is undeniable." Jordan clenched his fists. There was no real evidence, just the word of a security guard who had misidentified him. He had been blocks away when the crime happened, but somehow that didn't seem to matter. His appointed public defender, a tired-looking man with a wrinkled suit, barely put up a fight. Judge Whitaker leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Carter, do you have anything to say for yourself before I make my ruling?" Jordan took a deep breath. He had to stay calm. His mother had always taught him that. "Your Honor, I didn't do this. I wasn't anywhere near that store. Please look at the facts." The judge cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Enough. The court has heard all it needs to. We will reconvene shortly for the verdict." As the bailiff escorted Jordan back to a holding cell, he felt a rising sense of dread. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a setup. He was being railroaded. But what they didn't know was that Jordan had one last card to play. He just needed to make a single phone call. Sitting in the cold, dimly lit holding cell, Jordan's hands trembled, not from fear, but from frustration. He had always believed in the justice system. His mother had raised him to respect the law, to trust that truth would prevail. But today, that belief was slipping away. The bailiff stood outside his cell, arms crossed. "You get one call, kid. Make it count." Jordan didn't hesitate. He dialed the number he knew by heart. The phone rang once, twice, then a sharp, familiar voice answered. "Mom?" Jordan said, his voice steadier than he expected. "Jordan? Where are you?" His mother, U.S. Attorney General Olivia Carter, rarely sounded alarmed, but this time, her tone carried something different, an edge of fear mixed with fury. "Mom, I'm at the county courthouse. They're trying to pin a robbery on me. I didn't do it. The judge won't even listen." Silence. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice sharp as steel. "Stay calm. Who's the judge?" "Whitaker," Jordan replied, gripping the phone tightly. Another pause, then a low, dangerous chuckle. "Judge Harold Whitaker? The same one under investigation for judicial misconduct?" Jordan's breath hitched. "Wait, what? I can't say more right now, but listen to me carefully. Keep your head down, say nothing, and let them think they have control. I'm on my way." The line went dead. Jordan set the phone down and exhaled. His mother was the most powerful law enforcement officer in the country. If anyone could expose the truth, it was her. And if Judge Whitaker thought he could frame him and get away with it, he had just made the biggest mistake of his career. Jordan sat back on the hard bench, his mind racing. His mother's words echoed in his head. Judge Whitaker was under investigation? What did that mean, and why was this happening to him? Meanwhile, in his chambers, Judge Harold Whitaker leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a glass of whiskey. He had done this 100 times before, railroaded young black men into convictions they didn't deserve. It was easy. The system was built to favor people like him. He held the power, and no one had ever dared to challenge him. But this time was different. His clerk, a nervous man named Gregson, rushed in. "Sir, you need to see this." He placed a tablet on the desk. The screen showed a breaking news alert. U.S. Attorney General Olivia Carter is en route to county courthouse amid reports of judicial misconduct. Whitaker's smirk disappeared. "What the hell is this?" he growled. "Sir, the kid you just denied bail? That's her son," Gregson said in a near whisper. The judge's fingers tightened around his glass until it nearly shattered. For the first time in his career, he felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Fear. "Find me the DA. Now," he barked, "and get that kid back in my courtroom. We need to fix this before it gets out of hand." But it was too late. The storm was coming. And Olivia Carter wasn't just coming to defend her son. She was coming to bring the entire corrupt system crashing down. The tension in the courtroom was thick as Jordan was led back in, his hands still cuffed. But this time the energy had shifted. Whispers filled the room. Reporters had begun arriving, cameras flashing, pens scribbling. Judge Whitaker sat stiffly on the bench, his usual arrogance now laced with unease. His eyes flickered toward the double doors, knowing that any second now, the most powerful woman in the country would walk in. Jordan swallowed hard, watching as the doors finally swung open. A hush fell over the room. Olivia Carter had arrived. She moved with purpose, her navy blue suit crisp, her expression unreadable. Secret Service agents flanked her on both sides, scanning the room. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade, "I am Olivia Carter, U.S. Attorney General, and you are unlawfully detaining my son." A stunned gasp rippled through the crowd. Judge Whitaker's grip on his gavel tightened. "Miss Carter, this court," she interrupted, stepping closer, "has violated due process. The charges against my son are baseless, and I have evidence that this entire case is built on lies. I demand an immediate dismissal." The prosecutor, a young man named Edwards, looked as if he wanted to melt into the floor. He had built his argument based solely on the judge's guidance, never expecting this level of scrutiny. Judge Whitaker's lips pressed into a thin line. "We follow the law here, Miss Carter," she smirked. "Then let's make sure you do." The courtroom held its breath. The battle had begun. Judge Whitaker cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the room. "Miss Carter, I suggest you take a seat. Your son is facing serious charges." Olivia Carter didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step closer, her voice firm. "Serious charges? Based on what? A false report? A fabricated story meant to ruin an innocent young man's future?" The audience murmured. The tension in the room was palpable. Even the officers standing near Jordan looked uncertain now. Prosecutor Edwards shuffled his papers, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the evidence against the defendant is manufactured," Olivia interrupted, her sharp gaze landing on him. "And I can prove it." Judge Whitaker's face hardened. "Miss Carter, I won't allow this courtroom to become a spectacle." Olivia's expression was unreadable, but her voice remained calm. "You already did that when you framed my son." The judge's knuckles turned white against his gavel. He was losing control, and he knew it. "If you have evidence, present it," he snapped. Olivia turned to her legal assistant, who handed her a file. She walked toward the judge's bench, placing it in front of him. Phone records, surveillance footage, witness statements, all proving that my son was nowhere near the crime scene when it happened. The judge's jaw clenched as he flipped through the documents. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. The audience sat in stunned silence. Even Jordan, who had been bracing himself for the worst, felt a glimmer of hope. Judge Whitaker slammed the file shut. "This doesn't prove." "Oh, but it does," Olivia said smoothly. "And if you don't dismiss this case immediately, I will take this to the Supreme Court. And you, Judge Whitaker, will be the one on trial." The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge was cornered, and for the first time he had no way out. Judge Whitaker's face twisted with frustration as he stared at the damning evidence before him. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the file Olivia had handed him. The weight of the situation was pressing down on him, and for the first time he realized that he was no longer in control. The courtroom was silent, all eyes on him. The tension was suffocating. Even the bailiff looked uneasy. This is highly irregular," Judge Whitaker muttered, flipping through the pages once more, as if hoping to find a loophole that would save him. "There's nothing irregular about presenting the truth," Olivia shot back. "My son was framed, and now you have a choice, Your Honor. Correct your mistake or watch as this entire case crumbles in front of you." Jordan sat up straighter. He could hardly believe what he was witnessing. His mother wasn't just fighting, she was winning. The prosecutor, Edwards, leaned in, whispering something to the judge. Whatever it was, it didn't seem to comfort Whitaker. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. "I need a recess," he finally declared, his voice cracking. "No," Olivia countered immediately. "You've already wasted enough time. Drop the charges now." The audience gasped. A judge being ordered around in his own courtroom was unheard of. But Olivia Carter was no ordinary woman. She was the U.S. Attorney General, and she was here for justice. Judge Whitaker's grip tightened around his gavel. He had spent years getting away with decisions like this, bending the law to his will. But this time, he had underestimated the power of the truth. He hesitated for a long moment, then finally exhaled. This court will reconvene in 15 minutes, he said sharply before storming out through the side door. As soon as he left, murmurs filled the courtroom. Jordan turned to his mother, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, what happens now?" Olivia placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Now, we make sure justice is served." Judge Whitaker stormed into his chambers, slamming the door behind him. His hands trembled as he loosened his tie, his mind racing. He had been caught, exposed in a way he never thought possible. He had silenced defendants before, manipulated cases to fit his agenda, but never had someone with this much power fought back. Pacing the room, he grabbed his phone and dialed a number. "We have a problem," he whispered harshly. "The case against Jordan Carter is falling apart." On the other end of the line, a gruff voice responded. "Handle it." Whitaker exhaled sharply. "It's not that simple. His mother is Olivia Carter." Silence. "Then the U.S. Attorney General?" "Yes." "Then you better clean this up fast, or you'll be the one on trial." The line went dead. Whitaker cursed under his breath. His career, his influence, it was all on the verge of collapse. He needed a way out. Meanwhile, back in the courtroom, Olivia Carter sat beside Jordan, flipping through the case files, her sharp eyes catching every inconsistency. "This isn't just a wrongful conviction," she muttered. "This is a pattern." Jordan furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" She tapped a page. "Look at these past cases. Same judge, same prosecutor, same tactics. This isn't an accident. It's a system." The realization sent a chill down Jordan's spine. He had thought he was just unlucky, caught in a corrupt system. But now he understood. It wasn't just about him. This was bigger. The door to the judge's chamber creaked open, and Whitaker stepped back into the courtroom, his face pale. He sat down, adjusting his robe, avoiding Olivia's piercing gaze. "The court will proceed," he announced, his voice steadier than he felt. Olivia smirked. "Good, because I'm just getting started." Judge Whitaker could feel the walls closing in. He had spent years manipulating the system to serve his interests, and now, for the first time, someone had the power to challenge him. Olivia Carter wasn't just any defense attorney. She was the U.S. Attorney General, and she was digging deeper than anyone ever had. Jordan sat beside his mother, watching as she scribbled notes furiously. "Mom, what do we do now?" he asked, his voice laced with anxiety. Olivia glanced at him and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We expose him," she said calmly. "Not just for what he did to you, but for everyone else he's wronged." She turned her attention back to the judge. "Your Honor," she said, standing up. "Before we proceed, I'd like to enter new evidence into the record." Whitaker's jaw clenched. "What evidence?" he demanded. Olivia held up a thick folder, a pattern of wrongful convictions spanning the last 10 years. "All cases tried in this very courtroom, under your authority." Gasps rippled through the audience. The prosecutor, visibly nervous, shot Whitaker a look of uncertainty. "I move to dismiss this as irrelevant," the prosecutor objected. Olivia smirked. "Oh, it's very relevant, because the same officers involved in framing Jordan have also been involved in dozens of questionable convictions. And guess what? All under this judge." Whitaker's grip on his gavel tightened. "I will not allow this courtroom to become a circus," he snapped. Olivia leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "It's only a circus when the clowns are running the show, Your Honor." A murmur of approval spread through the courtroom. Whitaker's mask of confidence was slipping. The pressure was mounting, and everyone could see it. Jordan swallowed hard. For the first time, he felt like justice might actually be possible. But Whitaker wasn't done fighting. He still had cards to play. The only question was, how far would he go to save himself? Judge Whitaker felt the pressure mounting. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he realized Olivia Carter was systematically dismantling his entire career in front of the courtroom. He had to act, fast. "The court will take a brief recess," Whitaker announced abruptly, slamming his gavel down before anyone could object. He stood up and disappeared into his chambers, his heart pounding. Inside his office, he grabbed his phone with shaky hands and dialed a number. "We have a problem," he whispered. "Olivia Carter is onto us. I need this case shut down now." On the other end, a voice responded coldly. "Then do what you have to do. Just make sure she doesn't get what she wants." Whitaker took a deep breath and straightened his tie. He had always controlled his courtroom. He wouldn't let that change now. Meanwhile, Olivia sat with Jordan and his lawyer, sensing that Whitaker's sudden recess was nothing more than a stalling tactic. She leaned in. "Listen to me carefully," she said. "He's panicking. That means we're close to exposing him, but it also means he'll play dirty." Jordan nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle on his shoulders. "What do we do?" "We prepare for anything," she replied. Minutes later, Whitaker returned to the bench, his expression colder than before. "After careful consideration," he began, "I have determined that new evidence cannot be admitted at this stage. Therefore, we will proceed with the case as originally planned." A stunned silence filled the courtroom. Olivia stood up immediately. "Your Honor, that is highly irregular and unethical." "My court, my rules," Whitaker cut her off, smirking. "In this case, it's still going my way." But Olivia wasn't done yet. If Whitaker thought he could silence her, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Olivia Carter took a deep breath, her sharp eyes locked onto Judge Whitaker. He thought he could control the outcome of this case, but he had just made a fatal mistake, underestimating her. "Your Honor," she said firmly, stepping forward. "With all due respect, your decision to exclude key evidence violates Jordan Carter's constitutional rights. If you refuse to reconsider, I will have no choice but to escalate this matter to the federal judiciary." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Whitaker's smirk faltered for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "This is my courtroom, Miss Carter," he shot back, "and I will not be threatened." Olivia smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "I'm not threatening you, Your Honor. I'm simply reminding you that the law applies to everyone, even judges who believe they are above it." The tension in the room thickened. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, sensing the shift in power. Even Jordan, who had spent the past weeks feeling hopeless, now saw a glimmer of light. "I demand that this evidence be reconsidered," Olivia continued. "If not, I will file a motion to have you recused from this case due to bias." Whitaker clenched his jaw. He knew what that meant. If she succeeded in proving bias, his entire judicial record could be reviewed. Past cases could be reopened, and his reputation would be destroyed. He glanced at the courtroom. Reporters sat at the back, scribbling down notes. This was becoming bigger than he anticipated. "Fine," he finally said, his voice tight with barely concealed anger. "I will allow the evidence to be presented." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Olivia had won this round. As the new evidence was introduced, a video played on the courtroom screen, footage that would shake the entire case to its core. The courtroom fell silent as the video played on the large screen. Jordan sat still, his heart pounding, as the footage revealed what had truly happened on the night of his arrest. The video, taken from a nearby security camera, showed Jordan walking home with a group of friends, laughing and joking. A police cruiser pulled up beside them. Officers stepped out, weapons already drawn. "Stop right there," one of them barked. Jordan raised his hands immediately, confusion on his face. His friends backed away, their hands up as well. "What did I do?" Jordan asked, his voice calm but nervous. The officers didn't answer. Instead, they shoved him against the wall and handcuffed him roughly. One of them, Officer Daniels, smirked as he whispered something in Jordan's ear. Words that were now playing clearly in the courtroom. "You fit the description. Doesn't matter if you did it or not." Gasps filled the room. Jordan swallowed hard. He had never heard that part before. It was proof that the officers had no real reason to arrest him. Then came the most damning part, Judge Whitaker's direct involvement. Another clip showed Officer Daniels in the precinct, laughing with the judge on a private call. "Consider it handled," Whitaker said on the recording. "His type doesn't belong out there anyway." A shocked silence hung in the air. Judge Whitaker's face drained of color. Olivia turned to him, her voice like steel. "Your Honor, would you care to explain why you were in direct contact with an arresting officer before my client was even formally charged?" Whitaker opened his mouth, but no words came out. The walls were closing in. Jordan felt a lump rise in his throat. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't just another black teen fighting against a corrupt system. He was on the verge of proving his innocence. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The judge was trapped. The case had just taken a dramatic turn. Judge Whitaker sat frozen, his face pale as the courtroom erupted in whispers. The evidence against him was undeniable. The video footage had exposed not only his bias but also his direct involvement in ensuring Jordan's conviction. Jordan's mother, U.S. Attorney General Olivia Carter, stood confidently. "Your Honor," she addressed the presiding judge, "given the overwhelming proof of judicial misconduct, I motion to have this case dismissed immediately." The presiding judge, clearly disturbed by what he had just seen, turned to the prosecution. "Do you have any response?" The district attorney, who had been so confident in convicting Jordan, hesitated. His hands trembled as he adjusted his tie. "Your Honor, given the new evidence, we no longer have a case." A wave of relief washed over Jordan. He had fought so hard, endured so much, and now, finally, the truth had been laid bare for everyone to see. Judge Whitaker tried to speak, his voice shaking. This is an attack on my character. That footage is taken out of context." Olivia's sharp gaze cut through him. "There is no context where conspiring to convict an innocent black teenager is acceptable, Your Honor." She turned to the presiding judge. "I also motion for an investigation into Judge Whitaker's past rulings. If he was willing to frame my son, who knows how many other innocent people he's condemned?" Murmurs of agreement filled the courtroom. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously, realizing they were witnessing the fall of a powerful man. The presiding judge let out a deep sigh, rubbing his temples. "Motion granted. This case is dismissed, and an immediate investigation into Judge Whitaker's conduct will commence." The gavel slammed down. It was over. Jordan exhaled deeply, his body shaking from a mixture of relief and exhaustion. His mother squeezed his hand. As officers approached Judge Whitaker, his face twisted in anger. "You can't do this to me," he snarled. "I am the law." "No," Olivia said coldly. "The law is finally holding you accountable." The once powerful judge was escorted out of the courtroom, his career in ruins. Justice had finally been served. The moment Judge Whitaker was escorted out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing as they hurled questions. "Judge Whitaker, do you deny the allegations? How many innocent people have you wrongfully convicted? Do you have a statement on your misconduct?" Whitaker kept his head down, his once commanding presence reduced to a disgraced shell of a man. The officers led him through the crowd, shielding him from the chaos. Meanwhile, Jordan and his mother stepped out of the courthouse, met with a completely different reaction. Applause erupted from the crowd gathered outside. People cheered, chanting Jordan's name. A reporter pushed a microphone toward Olivia Carter. "Madam Attorney General, did you expect this level of corruption?" She took a measured breath. "Unfortunately, corruption exists in many places of power. But this case is just the beginning. We will ensure that no judge abuses their position the way Whitaker has." Jordan, still shaken but finding his voice, spoke up. "I wasn't the only one. There are others, people who didn't have a mother like mine to fight for them. They deserve justice too." The crowd roared in support. Social media was already ablaze with clips from the courtroom, hashtags like "Justice for Jordan" and "End Judicial Bias" trending worldwide. In a dark corner of the city, another judge watched the news with a grim expression. If Whitaker had fallen, who would be next? A storm was brewing, and the entire system was under scrutiny. For Jordan, this wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about changing the system for good. As Judge Whitaker's downfall dominated the news cycle, something remarkable happened. Other victims began coming forward. People who had been unfairly sentenced under Whitaker's rulings started sharing their stories. Families spoke out about their loved ones, some still serving time for crimes they hadn't committed. Lawyers began re-examining cases, finding patterns of bias and corruption. The Department of Justice launched an internal review, and Olivia Carter ensured that every wrongful conviction tied to Whitaker would be investigated. The pressure mounted, and soon, other judges with questionable histories found themselves under the microscope. Meanwhile, Jordan was still adjusting to his newfound fame. Overnight, he had become a symbol of resilience and justice. Colleges reached out, offering him scholarships. Activists and civil rights leaders wanted to meet him. But Jordan wasn't interested in just being a symbol. He wanted real change. Sitting across from his mother at their kitchen table, he asked, "Mom, what happens now?" Olivia smiled, placing a hand on his. "We don't stop. We make sure this never happens again, not just for you, but for everyone." Jordan nodded. "Then I want to help. however I can." His mother's pride was evident. "Then let's get to work." The city was shifting. The old ways were crumbling, and for the first time in a long time, people believed that justice might finally be served. But the fight wasn't over yet. There were still powerful figures who wanted to keep things the way they were. And they weren't going down without a fight. The courtroom was silent as Judge Whitaker stood before a federal tribunal. He was no longer in his grand seat of power, no longer wielding the gavel that had ruined so many lives. Instead, he was the one facing judgment. The charges against him were severe: judicial misconduct, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to wrongfully convict innocent individuals. The testimony of those he had wronged, including Jordan, sealed his fate. As the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, Jordan exhaled. Justice had finally been served. Whitaker would no longer have the power to destroy lives. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Olivia Carter, asking her what was next. She spoke with the strength and poise that had defined her career. "This case was never just about my son," she said. "It was about a broken system that allows people like Judge Whitaker to thrive. But change is coming, and this is just the beginning." Jordan, standing beside her, had never been more inspired. He realized that his experience had given him a voice, and he intended to use it. He announced his plans to advocate for wrongly convicted youth, determined to make sure no one else suffered as he had. As they walked away, Olivia turned to him. "You fought for yourself, but now you're fighting for others. I'm so proud of you." The city felt different now. A weight had been lifted. And while the fight for justice would never truly be over, today was a victory. For Jordan, for his family, and for every innocent person who had ever been silenced, this was a new dawn. If you were moved by Jordan's story and believe in justice, don't let this message end here. Share this story to raise awareness about wrongful convictions. Speak up against corruption, support organizations that fight for the innocent, and stay informed about your rights. Justice isn't just a word, it's an action. Be part of the change.